Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking some of the most, absolutely fascinating communication networks on the entire planet. I'm talking about the biological command centers and chemical postal services that silently govern literally everything alive, right? From the lightning-fast human reflexes that keep us safe, all the way to the slow, steady bending of a plant reaching toward the sunlight, life requires constant control and coordination. So let's see exactly how that happens. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever touched something incredibly hot, like, say, a stove, and just instantly pulled your hand back before you even realized what happened? How did your body instantly know it was in danger? And how did it coordinate the muscles in your arm to pull away before you consciously even formed the thought, yikes, that's hot? The stakes of control and coordination are, quite literally, life or death. And it all starts with this invisible, high-speed biological wiring. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the high-speed nervous system. Then we'll peek inside the human brain. After that, we'll cover how plants chemically coordinate, look at plant movement, and wrap up with the animal endocrine system. We're essentially contrasting our rapid electrical wiring with the slower chemical broadcasts found in both plants and animals. Kicking things off with Section 1, the high-speed nervous system. This is our body's rapid response network. So to respond quickly, our bodies first have to actually gather data from the environment, right? We do this using specialized groups of cells called receptors. Like you've got photoreceptors in your eyes for light and thigmoreceptors on your skin for touch. But once a receptor detects a stimulus, it needs a way to send that message. And that's where the fundamental unit of the nervous system comes in, the neuron. This is the VIP making all of this rapid biological communication possible. It's basically an elongated, highly specialized cell designed for one main gig: transmitting information via electrical impulses and chemical signals. And this brilliantly illustrates the lightning-fast journey of a nerve impulse. It's like a microscopic relay race. First up, hair-like structures on the neuron called dendrites grab the stimulus. Second, they pass this electrical impulse to the cyton, or cell body, which houses the nucleus. Third, the message zooms down a long structure called the axon. And this axon is often insulated by a myelin sheath to keep the signal moving incredibly fast. Finally, the signal hits the nerve ending. But here's the tricky part. Neurons don't actually touch. There's a tiny, microscopic gap between them called a synapse. So at the synapse, the electrical signal triggers chemicals to cross the gap and spark a brand new electrical impulse in the dendrites of the next cell. This whole shebang is happening millions of times a second. Now, remember our hot stove example from earlier? That instant reaction happens thanks to the reflex arc. It's honestly a brilliant evolutionary shortcut. When you touch a dangerous stimulus, the info doesn't go all the way up to your brain to be processed. That would just take way too long. Instead, the skin receptor sends a sensory neuron straight to the spinal cord. And the spinal cord? It acts independently. It instantly fires back a command through a motor neuron directly to your arm muscle, telling it to pull away. It's an entirely unconscious, involuntary, automatic response. This shortcut prevents your brain from getting completely overloaded with emergency decisions. But what about the decisions you actually do have to think about? That brings us to Section 2, inside the human brain. Let's look at the central nervous system's main command center. The brain's anatomy is methodically divided into 3 distinct regions. First, you've got the forebrain, which includes the massive dome-shaped cerebrum and the olfactory lobes. This is the main thinking part of your body. It has different lobes dedicated to sight, hearing, speech, and taste. Your forebrain is basically the reason you can do calculus, or, at least try to. Then you have the midbrain. This acts as the critical connection pathway, linking the forebrain to the hindbrain while also controlling certain reflex movements. And finally, the hindbrain features the cerebellum, the medulla, and the pons. So while your forebrain is doing all the heavy intellectual lifting, the hindbrain is quietly managing the vital background operations keeping you alive. Stuff like posture, movement, respiration, and involuntary actions like swallowing or coughing. Which brings us to a really crucial division of labor: voluntary versus involuntary actions. Voluntary actions are the ones controlled by your own will. Think choosing to speak, deciding to walk across a room, or doing math. These are handled mostly by your forebrain. Involuntary actions, on the flip side, are totally unconscious. You don't have to remind your heart to beat, or tell your stomach to digest your lunch, or frankly, remind yourself to vomit if you eat something toxic. These absolutely crucial involuntary tasks are quietly and constantly handled by the medulla oblongata in the hindbrain. It's just a beautifully perfect biological system. All right, let's shift gears entirely. Section 3, how plants chemically coordinate. We're moving from animal electrical systems to the slower chemical postal service of the plant kingdom. Because think about it, plants do not have a brain. They don't have a spinal cord or neurons or a nervous system at all. Yet they still need to coordinate their growth and respond to their environment. So even without a central command, plants orchestrate complex growth using a chemical postal service made up of phytohormones. Let's meet the main growth promoters. First up is auxin. Synthesized at the root and shoot tips, it promotes cell elongation. Fun fact, farmers actually use synthetic auxin to force roots to develop without seeds. Pretty cool, right? Next, gibberellin is found heavily in roots and seeds. It stimulates stem elongation, seed germination, and flowering. And then we have cytokinin, heavily concentrated in actively dividing cells. It promotes cell division, helps break seed dormancy, and even delays the aging process in leaves. These three are the ultimate builders of the plant kingdom. So the crucial point is that unending growth isn't always a good thing. Sometimes a plant actually needs to hit the brakes and stop growing to survive a drought or a harsh winter. That's where abscisic acid, or ABA, comes in. ABA acts as a necessary biological brakes. It's a growth inhibitor, doing the exact reverse of the promoters we just talked about. ABA causes seed dormancy so seeds can be stored safely. It actively closes the stomata to prevent water loss, and it's responsible for the purposeful wilting and dropping of leaves. Simply put, without these chemical brakes, plants couldn't survive. Moving right along, Section 4, Plant Movement and Tropism. Let's see how these chemical coordinators manifest physically. So, how do these invisible chemical coordinators actually manifest physically? While they don't have muscles, plants definitely move. We call these directional movements tropisms, where a plant actively grows toward or away from a specific stimulus. For example, phototropism is the response to light. If you've ever noticed a potted houseplant bending awkwardly toward a small window, you are watching positive phototropism in action. Geotropism is the response to gravity, naturally pulling roots downward. Hydrotropism is the movement towards water sources. And chemotropism is a super fascinating response to chemicals. It's beautifully illustrated during plant fertilization when a pollen tube grows precisely toward the ovule, guided entirely by chemical signals. But, not all plant movement is slow. While tropism is this slow, targeted directional growth, nastic movement is an entirely different beast. It doesn't care which direction the stimulus comes from, and it happens incredibly fast. A perfect example is the Mimosa pudica, commonly known as the touch-me-not plant. If you lightly touch its leaves, it doesn't slowly grow away from your finger. No, the entire leaf structure rapidly folds up and droops. The plant does this by suddenly changing the amount of water in its cells, causing them to shrink. It's an immediate, non-directional response to a touch stimulus. Honestly, it's wild to watch. Okay, transitioning back to us animals, Section 5, the animal endocrine system. Let's explore our own version of the chemical postal service. Animals obviously have a rapid response nervous system, but just like plants, we also rely heavily on a slower chemical postal service called the endocrine system. Let's move to and see how this builds out across the body. This system is made up of ductless glands. That means they don't use tubes. Instead, they secrete powerful hormones directly into the bloodstream to act as widespread signals to target organs. The pituitary gland, often called the master gland, sits up in the brain and secretes growth hormone to regulate bone and muscle development. The thyroid in your neck secretes thyroxine, controlling your metabolism. The adrenal glands sit right on top of your kidneys, pumping out adrenaline for your body's fight-or-flight emergency response, instantly regulating heart rate and blood pressure. And the testes in males and ovaries in females release hormones that govern sexual organs and secondary characteristics. Now, what's really interesting here is how the pancreas illustrates perfect chemical coordination by using insulin and glucagon in opposing ways to keep your body balanced. Located just below the stomach, the pancreas acts as an endocrine gland that secretes these two distinct hormones. They work together by literally opposing each other. If your blood sugar gets way too high, the pancreas releases insulin to lower it. But if your blood sugar drops too low, it releases glucagon to increase it. It's just a brilliant example of chemical coordination, keeping your internal environment perfectly stable without you ever having to think about it for a second. Which brings us to a final provocative thought. What would happen if the invisible electrical and chemical networks quietly governing your body suddenly shut down for just 1 second? Well, the truth is, life as we know it would instantly cease. From the lightning-fast impulses flashing across your synapses to pull your hand from a fire, to the slow, steady drip of hormones keeping your heart beating, or even a plant bending toward the sun, this constant, non-stop communication is the very definition of being alive. The more we understand these networks, the more we can appreciate the absolutely breathtaking complexity of life happening inside us every single moment. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.